So a new CNBC article is pointing out how Joe Biden had a really good fundraising haul in the second quarter of 2020, that he and the DNC and his committees outraised Trump and the Republicans in their committees. But there's one key reason being given for this success. Bernie Sanders is no longer a threat to the rich and wealthy and well-connected that usually vote Democrat and donate to the Democratic Party. Joe Biden has seen a spike in donations from big money sources directly to him and to many of his affiliated committees. They've raised a ton of money from wealthy people who were waiting on the sidelines because they weren't so sure that Bernie Sanders wasn't going to win. For a while there, Bernie was the favorite. After Nevada especially, Bernie was definitely in a position to win. And even on Super Tuesday, we weren't 100% sure. So what happened was a lot of rich people, not only were they divided between the various candidates, between Buttigieg and Bloomberg and Biden, but they didn't want to give money that could subsequently be used to help Bernie Sanders because they didn't want Bernie to have influence in office. So rich people, again, we're not talking about Trump donors. We're talking about people that often vote Democrat, but would leave their money on the sidelines if it was a Bernie versus Trump battle. Here's what the article says. It says here, many of Joe Biden's bundlers told CNBC that the renewed effort by these business leaders is linked to the fact that Senator Bernie Sanders and more liberal candidates are no longer a threat to becoming president. It notes here, quote, the big money donors are capitalists. For a minute, Bernie was close to locking it up, but then came South Carolina. They were petrified of Trump and horrified by Bernie. Now they actually have a choice. Before they didn't. Florida businessman and Biden bundler John Morgan told CNBC. And so what they're saying there very clearly is that these are the sort of people that don't like Donald Trump. They're rich people, but maybe it's on social issues and cultural issues, can't stomach Donald Trump, but also likely hate Bernie Sanders just as much, if not more than Donald Trump. And so they were fearing an election where they didn't have a choice. It was either give money to Trump and his reactionary ideas or give money to Bernie Sanders, who supports equality and justice for all. And these centrist billionaire donors are like, my God, both of these things are awful. I can't support either. I'm going to keep my money on the sideline in this election. But when Biden won, really any neoliberal would have sufficed. But when Biden won, they said, I can throw my money safely behind Joe Biden because, as Joe Biden has said time and time again, nothing will fundamentally change if I am president. And rich people have taken that to heart. And so they would rather bring back the stability of the Biden-Obama neoliberal years, really of the Biden, Obama, Bush, Clinton, Reagan, broad neoliberal era. They want that stability back, and they're willing to pay hundreds of millions of dollars to get it. And they're also willing to do it even more now because Bernie's down and out. You know, maybe some of them are concerned that Joe Biden seems to be nodding to some of Bernie's policies in these joint task force documents, these policy papers. But as I've sort of noted and many others have noted, I don't actually trust that many of those policies will make it into the platform. And even those that make it into the platform won't seriously be pushed by Joe Biden if and when he becomes president. So rich people are noting that for all the bluster of the Bernie-Biden alliance, it's not going to amount to much for the left. Rich people feel safe throwing your money in. And this is what I've always been trying to say, that the rich and wealthy and well-connected, even ones that are supposedly liberal, hate Bernie Sanders just as much as they hate Donald Trump, maybe even more. Because when it comes to protecting fundamental human rights, because I can agree that Donald Trump is fundamentally dangerous to a lot of marginalized people. And these rich billionaires and millionaires that try to virtue signal about the fact that they also care about those folks were not going to be willing to spend the money to help Bernie Sanders get elected because he was going to raise their taxes a little bit. Make it a bit more expensive for them to have $50 million. Make it a bit more expensive for them to make billions off the stock market. Make it a bit more expensive for them to live the lifestyles that regular working class and middle class people can barely even dream of. And so they said, okay, on the one hand, you have mass dehumanization of racialized people, and on the other, you have Medicare for all. I'm not going to back either of these. And so it's a mask-off moment for the richest and most well-connected and most politically engaged donor class on the Democratic side. They don't care about regular people, at least not as much as they care about their own wealth and power and privilege and connections. That's why they're 100% behind Biden. That's why he's outraising Trump now. And that's why they were going to totally starve Bernie, at least as much as they could, of fundraising. And this goes back to what I've always said about big presidential politics and why Bernie was so terrifying to the rich and wealthy and well-connected in the Democratic Party and in the Republican Party. That if Bernie became the nominee, this would be the first election in generations since FDR where the rich did not win either way. Again, as I've noted, rich people sometimes win with one candidate over the other. Some rich people, depending on how they make their money, might be more well off under a Democrat or more well off under a Republican, but the rich and wealthy and well-connected often donate to both parties, to both presidential campaigns, or at least they switch election to election for a reason. Because ultimately, on economic issues, there's far fewer differences between traditional candidates from the traditional parties than there is between Bernie Sanders and a traditional conventional Democrat. Bernie Sanders being the nominee would have meant the rich could actually lose something for once. Bernie's not even that radical. He wasn't even going to take all that much from the richest Americans in the grand scheme of things. They all still would have been fabulously wealthy. But of course, paying slightly more is just not good enough for them. They can't tolerate such insolence from the people. So they wanted at all costs to stop Bernie. And as I've also noted before, look at a campaign by the fuel that runs its engine. I've used that metaphor so often. A campaign is an engine, and the fuel you put into it determines what comes out of that engine. And so you can have all the fancy platform pieces, all the well-meaning rhetoric, all the outreach to progressives via the task forces, but when your campaign is being run by donations by rich people, by billionaires and millionaires and anti-progressive insiders to the political party, and by former Bush-era Republicans at the Lincoln Project, you damn well know that the exhaust will not be pumping out progressive fumes. It's not going to happen. Folks, this is the real Biden campaign. Its energy is being driven not by popular excitement, but by one, a legitimate and reasonable desire to defeat Donald Trump, and two, a newfound excitement among the elite that the Bernie Sanders experiment was defeated.